Hello TikTokers, I'm on my way home, but I thought I'd stop because I've been told to apply for a Vicarious Trauma training course. And I was wondering if you knew what that was. Well, I deal with a lot of domestic abuse, and some of it is really quite traumatic. And what vicarious trauma is where you actually take on the trauma of the individual who's been traumatized. So you'll find it a lot, with firemen, with nurses, with people who deal with traumatic incidents. They go home thinking about that person. They're thinking about what they could have done. They overextend themselves. They can't think straight. They start isolating themselves. I mean, I haven't got to that extreme because my extent of trauma isn't that great. But trauma can filter all the time. And I was thinking about when people watch movies and you're seeing violence all the time, or if you've gone out and you've witnessed violence on a bus, or you've witnessed violence in a shop, or like that video that was going around with that girl who was being strangled by that shopkeeper. And, you can end up thinking, could this happen to me? You can end up, because you're a black person, you can end up feeling quite traumatized by what happens to other black people. And they call it vicarious trauma. That's vicarious trauma. So they do have courses about it, and I was reading up about how what they actually teach you. Really, they just teach you to kind of distance yourself emotionally, don't overextend yourself, don't get too involved. But if you're an empath or somebody who's quite sensitive and quite compassionate, when you see someone getting harmed, it can actually affect you. Even when somebody cries, I often cry if I see somebody else cry, and I can't kind of stop it. So there's lots of different ways and different levels that vicarious trauma takes. So I'll just read this out quickly so you can tell whether or not you're a victim or you're suffering from vicarious trauma. If you're experiencing lingering feelings of anger, rage and sadness about the person's victimization, so somebody's been victimized, like when we saw George Floyd with the knee in his neck, and when we see people just being abused. It doesn't have to be black people. I'm only talking about black people because I'm black. But it could be any nationality, any of your people or anybody close to you who you've seen victimized or hurt or traumatized in some way. If you've witnessed it or read about it, and it can affect you and impact you. It can affect the way you interact with other people. You just think, okay, you're blowing it off, it's just happened, but you don't realize the impact. Becoming overly involved emotionally with the person who has been traumatized. Experiencing bystander guilt, shame, feelings of self-doubt. Sometimes you see people who are hurt and you think, I should have done something about it. Yesterday when I was going home, I saw a car crash and I wanted to stop, but there was so much traffic. And then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to get pulled in. It's not like you just give your details and off you go. No, there's a whole big rigmarole. So I went home and I felt guilty for going home. That's what you call bystander guilt, because you haven't done anything. And a lot of times we've witnessed things happening, especially in this day and age. We're so afraid of what somebody's going to pull out. Are they going to pull out a knife on us? We do not know what's going to happen when we interfere. So we stand back and something bad happens to somebody. We watch people being bullied, beaten, things happening to them, and we do not do anything. And when we go home, we think, oh my God, I should have done something. That's bystander guilt, and that can be traumatic. It can take its toll. Being preoccupied with thoughts of the individual outside a work situation. Vicarious trauma tends to relate to people at work. It tends to be work related. So that's why it says that. a loss of hope, pessimism, and cynicism. I'm not quite sure why it does that, why vicarious trauma, but it probably means that you actually take on the trauma of the other person. That's what vicariously means. It's like, like when you have some parents and they say, oh, my child is a doctor, they've got a PhD, they're in the Air Force, or they're an MP, or they live with the Queen, and they try to get the accolades of their children through, they take on the accolades as though they've done the work, when in fact it's the child. So what they are actually doing, they're actually living vicariously through their children. Their children are giving them credit. And I would say that narcissists do that. They take on your accolades, who you are, and how maybe popular you are, or how maybe stable you are. And by being with you, they live vicariously through you, and they live vicariously through all the famous people they know, or all the popular people they know, and that's how they feel validated. So in this particular case, it's more on the negative side, where you can actually take on the trauma of an individual. You can end up distancing, numbing, detachment, cutting people off, staying busy, avoid listening to people's stories and traumatic experiences. I find it's really difficult to listen to people's traumatic experiences. I tend to cut myself off. I didn't realize that I was vicariously traumatized, but that is one of the symptoms. Strategies for reducing risk of vicarious trauma. If you feel you may be suffering from vicarious trauma, try the following coping strategies which reduce the risks. Increase your self-observation. That means watch yourself, watch your moods, watch how you're reacting. Recognize and chart your signs of stress, vicarious trauma, and burnout, because you can actually burn out in the end. Take care of yourself emotionally. Engage in relaxing and self-soothing activities. Nurture and self-care. Look after your physical and mental well-being. Maintain a healthy work-life balance. Have outside interests. Be realistic about what you can accomplish and avoid wishful thinking. Don't take on responsibility for your victim, in quotes, well-being, but supply them with tools to help themselves. You mustn't be a rescuer. A lot of empaths are rescuers. Instead of giving a person the tools to get on with their lives, we tend to be their tool, and we tend to take on that responsibility. Balance your caseload, mix of more and less traumatized clients, victims and non-victims. That means, don't surround yourself with people who are always having problems and who you're taking that problem on. You'll find a lot of people there quick to offload on you, and you're left with it. And if you're that type of person, if you're an empath and you're that type of person to take it on, you end up being vicariously traumatized. They go off after they've offloaded on you, and you end up with it. And you find it difficult to carry. So take regular breaks, take time off when you need to, seek social support from colleagues and family members. Use a buddy system, particularly important for people, just ordinary people. You need to be able to talk to people and offload it. And not offload it in a way that burdens someone else, but maybe you can do it in a way that is helpful, with people who can help you. Use peer support and opportunities to debrief. Take up training opportunities. If you need it, take up time-limited group or individual therapy. There are also significant organizational factors that can increase the risk of a person being vicariously traumatized, which should be assessed and addressed. Sometimes you just need time out. But all I'm saying is that when you're surrounded by people who are offloading all their trauma and their traumatic events, and you are there trying to help them and absorb it, and instead you're actually taking on their problems, that's not good. Because if you're not equipped and you don't have the experience, you can actually end up being burnt out. So that's all for now. I hope you found it useful and helpful. I'm Black Bright News on YouTube. That's vicarious.